Forspoken is almost upon us, ladies and gentlemen. Square Enix's new IP will launch on January 24th, 2023, at which point we'll be isekai'd into somewhere that's not what I would call Earth, where you'll be seeing freaking dragons, and where, oh yeah, you're going to be talking to a cuff. But you want to know what the most shocking thing is about this world? The frickin' system requirements. This, ladies and gentlemen, was tweeted out by the official Forspoken Twitter page on January 17th, 2023, just yesterday, and it's made quite a few headlines and kickstarted a number of discussions about just how ridiculous these system requirements are for PC players, given that Forspoken, when it comes to its graphics fidelity, doesn't reach the level of other open worlds whose system requirements are significantly lower. Expanding the system requirements image will reveal the following, highlighting minimum, recommended, and ultra system requirements. And when it comes to system requirements, what you normally want to look at are the recommended specs. Minimum, yes, you'll technically be able to boot up the game and it's technically going to be playable, but not in the most ideal state. So when it comes to recommended specs, yeah, what is going on here? This just raises a number of red flags, potentially indicating that the game might not be as well optimized as it should be. So when it comes to CPU, I'm more familiar with Intel and NVIDIA, but AMD users can check out the requirements for those as well. When it comes to Intel, a Core i7 8700 being the recommended specs is already pushing it, 3.7 gigahertz or better. But then let's go to the video card section where it says that you need an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3070, 8 gigabytes of video RAM in order to be able to run this game properly. Now, I use the term properly loosely because what the system requirements defines as adequate performance, given the hefty specs that are required to run this game, is 1440p 30 frames per second. As a point of comparison, Red Dead Redemption 2, which many would argue is the better looking open world when put side by side to Forspoken, at least based on the footage that we have seen so far, the recommended graphics card for that game is an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 with 6 gigabytes of VRAM. And as far as CPU goes, it recommends a Core i7 4770K. And sure, Red Dead Redemption 2 is an older game and it might not be using some of the more graphically advanced effects that Forspoken might potentially be using, but it doesn't change the fact that when I look at those two games side by side, Red Dead Redemption 2 still looks utterly gorgeous. It's just, for me, night and day when it comes to just how much more alive the world looks and the density of what's going on in terms of the environments. And even looking at a more recent game like Cyberpunk 2077, which has hefty requirements, you'll find that for 1440p resolution with ultra settings, the specs are still far more reasonable than what Forspoken demands. For these settings that are comparable to Forspoken's 1440p system requirements, you only need a Core i7 4790 and an RTX 2060. And based on footage that I've seen of Forspoken, I would definitely argue that Cyberpunk 2077 is the better looking game compared to Forspoken as well. Also kind of insane is the amount of RAM required, the amount of memory that they recommend. 24 gigabytes of RAM. When people give you recommended specs for building a brand new PC, what they'll usually tell you is that if you're using this PC for gaming, then you're really not going to need more than 16 gigabytes of RAM. Hell, 16 gigabytes might be more than enough at this current stage. Red Dead Redemption 2's recommended specifications list 12 gigabytes of RAM, and Cyberpunk 2077 for 1440p gaming also recommends 12 gigabytes of RAM. But Forspoken, for its recommended specs for 1440p gaming, for 30 FPS 1440p gaming, the game recommends 24 gigabytes of RAM, twice that of Red Dead Redemption 2 and Cyberpunk 2077, with 16 gigabytes of RAM being the minimum requirement in order to be able to run this game at 720p 30 FPS. To run this game at HD 30 FPS, not even full HD, just regular HD 30 FPS 720p, you need an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 6GB VRAM. That's the graphics card that Red Dead Redemption 2, which again is, I think, the better looking game, lists as part of its recommended specifications, as you can see right here. And then the cherry on top is just how much storage space this game takes up. 150 gigabytes or more of HDD, SSD, or NVMe SSD. This is a storage space requirement that would make the Call of Duty franchise proud. And then if you want to run the game at 4K 60 FPS, well, I mean, prepare to shell out a ridiculous amount of money because the ultra specs that are required to run this game are a Core i7 12700K and an RTX 4080 with 16 gigabytes of video RAM. Now, I happen to be in a fortunate position where I'm able to have a really powerful PC. The one that I have right now is fairly new. I got it a couple months ago, and it's got an Intel Core i9-12900K CPU, and the GPU is a 3080 Ti. It's got 64 gigabytes of RAM. But even then, given these system requirements, I'm afraid that these specs will still not be enough to really run this game as smoothly as I'd like, though, of course, the jury's still out. I'd have to get my hands on the game, the PC version specifically. But yeah, I mean, I don't have an RTX 4080. I have a 3080 Ti, so I'm probably somewhere between recommended and ultra when it comes to the system requirements listed here. I hope I can run the game at least at 1440p 60 FPS, but I don't know. I'm just generally worried that Forspoken's performance on PC will not be optimal even if you do meet the system requirements, because from the graphics fidelity that comes across from the footage that I've seen and the demo that I've played of this game, these system requirements, these specs just do not seem justified. This just seems like the kind of game where ideal performance will be inaccessible to the majority of PC gamers who don't have access to or are able to afford these system specs. I mean, the fact that NVIDIA's GTX 1060 graphics card is only good enough for 720p 30 FPS gameplay, that right there is deeply concerning to me. Now, I will emphasize that the jury's still out. I haven't gotten my hands on the final version of Forspoken for PC, so I myself haven't gauged what the performance will be like, but the system requirements do seem to be hinting at potential rough tidings on that front. Though fingers crossed that, I don't know, the system requirements are woefully overselling the actual requirements of the game, just woefully overshooting what will be required in order for people to just get decent to good 60 FPS performance on PC. But the thing is, if Square Enix and the developers were confident about Forspoken's quality and performance and polish, I feel like they wouldn't be waiting until the last minute to send out review copies to reviewers and news outlets. ScaleUp here, for example, tweeted that, well, these specs are something. I've requested a PC review code from Square Enix, but nothing's come through yet. We'll try to get a review out on Embargo, but depends on if/when code arrives. I myself got an email from Square Enix where I was able to request a review copy for Forspoken, but I myself have also just not gotten anything from them. Now, news outlet Forbes reports here that codes have gone out to some members of the press. This was an update after having reported that no news outlet seems to have gotten a code. Well, they finally did, but just a few days out before launch. And even then, the review embargo is the day before the game comes out, so on January 23rd. And it's seldom the case that a game whose review embargo is lifted at the very last minute, right before the game comes out, turns out to be something worth writing home about. When a company is really confident about their product and its quality, what they'll usually do is send out review units weeks in advance so that the review embargo can be lifted a week or two before the product's launch, because they want to give enough window for that positive word of mouth to spread. And then on the opposite side of the fence is when a company does not feel confident about their product, they'll set the review embargo shortly before the product's launch so that there is a very narrow window for negative word of mouth to spread. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting with Forspoken. It feels like Square Enix knows that this game is not going to garner the kind of praise that they're hoping. I'm not saying that's 100% guaranteed. It's entirely possible that a game whose review embargo is going to be lifted the day before launch will turn out to be good, but those cases are rare. That goes doubly true in the AAA landscape of video games, where publishers really want to control the narrative to maximize sales for a game that they poured so much money on that may very well flop because the quality and polish just isn't there, and the word of mouth doesn't lend itself to a product that will go on to become a mass hit. But I don't know, I hope I'm being paranoid. I hope that I'm wrong about all of this when I do get my hands on the game for PC or PlayStation 5. But you know, having covered video game releases for years now, I've seen these kinds of patterns before, and Forspoken is following a pattern that indicates that the launch may be in for some rough tidings. While I cannot say anything definitively, at the very least, do keep in mind that these are the system requirements. They are far loftier than I feel like they have any right to be. And so at the very least for now, be cautious. Do not get this game before reviewers report back on the game's performance on both PC and PlayStation 5 in conjunction with the visual fidelity of each respective version. Just be on the lookout, because the way they're handling the review embargo combined with the system specs, combined with just what we've generally seen from the game and what people have played from the game based on that PlayStation 5 demo that came out, the reception just hasn't been glowing. But I cannot say much more than that until I get my hands on the full game and play it in its entirety, or at least play it enough to be able to gauge exactly where this game sits when it comes to quality and polish. But until then, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Forspoken's PC system requirements. And if these system requirements evoke the same kind of concerns that I'm feeling right now, is it just me, or is this something that a lot of people are feeling might indicate that the game is in for a rough ride come launch? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.